Honestly, for a 67-year-old George, I think you're really, really, really technical. You're doing a great job.
These are the standards.
Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. That was for you, Arsene Wenger. What a win last night. Arsenal beat Chelsea 5-0, and the football gods were shining down as George in many senses. One, because we absolutely smashed them, which we're going to talk about, and two, because we recorded an entire podcast on Monday not talking about that game, which didn't work. So we're back on Wednesday recording our hour-long podcast, and we get to talk about this win, which I'm very, very excited to do. It's... I think we should start with just kind of overall feelings, because at this stage in the season, there's obviously analysis to do. There's obviously, when we will come to individual performances and how we think it all shaped up. But my main feeling coming away from last night is such a sense of pride and joy. Yeah. And I hope you guys listening, and thank you so much for doing so, are feeling the same, because, thinking about where we are at in the season. We're in a run-in. And we just beat a team of, look, collectively they're not good. I'm not saying they are, but there are some really solid individuals, and there's a lot of talent in that Chelsea team. They're not bums. We might laugh at them, but they aren't. I promise you, once they get together, they'll be a bit of a force once they sort themselves out. But the pride that I have, ironically, pride of London, at beating that team is in that way, in that manner, at the time of the season we've done it, is my overwhelming feeling. So yeah, how are you feeling this morning?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to process, I'll be honest with you, because here, I'll spin something else to you. We lost 1/2 against Aston Villa, and there was serious polls about whether Mikel Arteta should stay. And that was the only half that we lost in 2024 against a good Villa side, but it's something that can happen. You can lose a football game. And so the storybook narrative, by the way, it did turn the complete other direction. And within a week, you're talking about how prideful you are of this team, how representative they are of probably everything that people had hoped. This entire idea of why we've moved to the Emirates is to compete in these moments, just something we fundamentally really haven't seen, I would say. Some people might point to the Leicester title run, and I'll be quite honest, that doesn't count for me. This is distinctly different. This is late April, challenging for a title. This time, at that point in that season, it was completely over. This is not the same experience, no matter how old or young you are. This is probably the closest run-in that we have had since the Invincibles. And it's probably some of the best play that we've seen since the Invincibles, which is backed up by stats. It is our best goal difference in a Premier League season, factually. And so I'm trying to balance it, because, yes, they're not a good team. All these things are true. Although that one stat about the goal difference is just correct because Chelsea. But, I saw a really brilliant tweet that I think really summed up my thoughts. We use Chelsea Football Club like a Sheffield United to improve our goal difference in a title run-in. Does that not send kind of the sentence all in one? And, I can't wait to talk about some of the performances on the inside. I think there was some technical tweaks that I really want to get into, because they're so important to our game model that we're going to have serious conversations, mate. I want us to have a serious conversation about the midfield, about what we can expect, because I've honestly felt, until you see it, a lot of people have used, and it's maybe not fair because it's not a crutch, but they've used the crutch of he's not available, we can't ignore it. And because you haven't seen it, you haven't seen the impact, you don't know the product. And I've been very, very insistent that it's going to be a significant change. And I think we saw it. The level of domination. You haven't
mentioned, it's Thomas Partey as you're talking about, just to
be clear. Yes. But in general,
he's not Voldemort. You could say his name.
Well, of course. But also, it doesn't have to be him, but what that profile gives you, because we're sitting here right now talking about next steps, regardless, right? We're talking about looking towards a summer for improvement. We've seen so many metrics. I've run out of ways to describe how the improvement has been seen in the team. But there's still something missing. And I think post-Bayern, there is moments people point to. Mikel has mentioned it. You've mentioned it in a video, slight plug. And, I think when you talk about moments and you talk about things that can improve this team, you need to start looking a little bit deeper about how we're going to move forward, how we're going to evolve again, because we'll have to evolve again. But I'm just sat there to loop it back, just proud of the boys. That's 4 wins in April. We've now matched the run-in of 10 games of last year with 4 games to spare. Like, that's significant. This is not like last year. And I'm really dead set against arguing that. Like, I'd love to hear your points, because, I mean, we may not do it. The big thing may not happen. We may not get the big prize. But I distinctly push back on any idea that this is the same Arsenal team that we've seen of last year. I distinctly push back on any idea that this is the same quality of team and the same mentality of team as well. Because there's a lot of players that we can highlight that have really stepped up this season. And, you know, to have the best record against the top 6, the best record against your title rivals, these aren't small things. These are you doing what you haven't done for 20 years. And we deserve to be where we're at. And I sent a tweet. I wasn't able to really get technical on the details, but I just simply said, we are the best performing team in the title run-in and the best performing team across this season. Do we get the big Premier League title? I'm not too sure. But there's no doubt that Arsenal have been the most deserving team this year, in my opinion. And that for me says quite a bit. It starts leaning into the favorite categories. When you start looking at the season and you look at a team that's able to do that across a huge 38-game sample, and not for 19, 20 games, not for moments. I just felt last season, the story of last season was we played in 20, 30-minute intervals where we were the best team in the league, and then things would falter, things would stop. There's a consistency to the approach. And of course, there's been a couple games that we can improve. We haven't been at our best, but that can happen in a season. Just on a whole, there's been a different level of dominance displayed in everything that we do. And so it's just been a prideful morning, a very prideful morning, looking at your son that has got the achievement award and thinking, attaboy. And it's just one of those things where I'm trying not to go overboard, and I'm thinking to myself, we've got a big derby to look forward to. And what a message that would send. To get a win there, get St. Tottenham's Day, confirm Champions League football, which no one's talking about on the same day, by the way, because we're focused on bigger things. And that's what we've wanted. So I'm just really happy.
Yeah, it's yeah, I think you sum it up really well, mate. There's so many aspects to come to this. You know, I saw something earlier that said, where are we? We're most wins in the Premier League, highest number of goals scored, least goals conceded, goal difference of 56, highest number of clean sheets in the league. I think Raya's about to win the Golden Glove. I think Jordan Pickford still, you know, mathematically has a chance or something. Undefeated in the league against title contenders Liverpool and City, 6th win by 5+ goals this season. By the way, we've got wins by 5 or more goals this season. In the Premier League, Man City had 7 in 1920, and then we're at 6 in 23-24 as the second best. You know, we are an unbelievable force. And I think the big thing, and it's sort of something you were mentioning there, was I think we were all... I look at there's so many aspects to control in football. You know, you could look at transfers and recruitment and, you know, culture and fitness and boots and everything, every single aspect. What I've said this season is on the pitch, I've really had very few worries and doubts about our coaching this season in terms of how we approach all those aspects. Really haven't had any of those doubts. Have I had any doubts off the pit field for a while? But you look at our commercial side of things, you look at how we're evolving, you know, the news this week about, you know, how we're trying to adapt the visual identity, how we've dealt with the contract situations, trying to get, you know, Juliet Slot in, sister of Arne Slot, who, you know, to deal with the commercial side of things, whether it's, you know, looking at how we deal with the community now. Every aspect of Arsenal on and off the pitch is really beginning to come together and has been coming for a while. But the one thing, maybe the one big thing that we've questioned, it's never been on this podcast and elsewhere, has never really been the talent ID. We always feel like we're heading in the right direction. We think we'll make the right decisions in the summer, which is so exciting. It's been that April crash. It's been that thing of, it just feels like every season we show so much promise. We may feel like we've maximized all of these variables, but that one thing in April, we come to it and we can't seem to get over the line. That didn't happen this season. Getting over the line maybe is wrong to put in there, because that's a separate thing.
Do you think it's fair to say like self-destructive in a sense?
Yeah. There's a self-destruct gene in Arsenal that has been apparent for a number of seasons that we haven't done this year. What's happened? The big worry post Aston Villa and the big worry post Bayern Munich was it's happening again. Mm-hmm. It's happening again. Arsenal are falling apart at the end of the season. They show all this promise, as you say. We were the best team in the league for 20-minute, 30-minute spurts last season, and we've been the best team in the league for long stretches this season. But it doesn't matter because we still fall apart in April. We haven't done that. We've lost one game in the Premier League, and we went out of the Champions League, and they are isolated. They're in different competitions. We are. Of course, we want to get over the line, but we haven't done that same self-destruct thing. We beat Wolves. We came out and beat Chelsea in that way. As you say, we may not get over the line, but that self-destruct thing hasn't happened this season. It hasn't. We are forcing Man City to earn it. Last season, they picked up the Premier League kind of in those last couple of games, a bit of a canter. Mm-hmm. We are forcing them right to the wire here. We're saying to them, if you want to go and do it, you're going to have to put forward, as you pointed out many times, an historic run. If you want to win this league, you have to put in and they think they are currently on their best unbeaten run ever.
They are.
For Man City.
Well, since Pep's been, actually ever, yeah, because no one's been better than Pep.
It's for Man City.
Yeah.
It's for Man City.
Yeah.
29 league games, and if they go and do it, I think in the last 6, they would have 35 games in all comps unbeaten. We're saying to them, we're not going to blow up anymore. So you have to go and do it.
You want to beat us, make history.
Yeah, which is a great line, and will be on your tombstone. But yeah, just that is the most exciting part. Of course, there's going to be people say, "Well, we still, lost against Villa." So okay, but it hasn't happened in the same manner. That's my point. It hasn't happened in the same sort of self-destructive way where we feel like we've completely capitulated in every single sense, which it was threatening to do. And that's what's so exciting for me.
I know we've had this discussion, but it got deleted. This idea of bottling, we have to come to and define it. Because for me, that's got to be a part of the discussion in the trajectory. So maybe we park it towards the end because I mean we're still on the Chelsea and I want to get through that game, and we'll park that for later. But
we'll come back to the run-in.
So I'll loop back to try to get to Chelsea. But I mean, I do think it's really important that we as fans and an Arsenal fan community define what bottling is. Because for so much of our career, we've seen it and we're not seeing it, and it makes us nervous. I truly believe that. I truly believe that there's this level of every fan, I think, is feeling a kind of sense of, well, when does it fall apart? And it's not. And it's making them nervous. Because it's allowing them to believe. And personally, I'm not in that camp. I've believed in this team for quite a while. I've seen that hill. I've seen what it takes to win. And so we'll get into the part of the modeling, maybe why there might be a difference in how some fans interpret what they're seeing. Because, mate, you've listed off how many records in the previous couple minutes. And are we understanding what those mean? Or do we just list them as like, oh, tick, Arsenal are good, without contextualizing what they mean? Because there's a lot of narratives there that Arsenal aren't the same team here. And I think to every title race, there is a protagonist and there's someone that chases. And, in many ways, I almost feel like Arsenal have been the quiet protagonist of this title race. People reacting to Arsenal has been the case since the beginning of 2024, in my opinion. And, I think this game encapsulates it, just to loop it back. And I look at it and we didn't get out of third gear in terms of there were some issues in the first half. Like, I mean, I think between the first and the second half here, I know people don't want to talk about negatives on a big 5-0 win, but the first half, I think the manner in which we were conceding transitions was still annoying. I don't think that we ever conceded any high-quality shots, though. I'll still maintain that. There was a brilliant cross that came in. Not cross, sorry, but there was a corner routine that, Disasi accumulates most of the XG for Chelsea on that he really should get to. We can maybe critique a man-marking job in that instance, but on the whole, they didn't really concede very threatening shots. I think one thing that we can say is Nicholas Jackson has, for all of his faults in front of goal, given two of the biggest defenses worries in terms of his channel running. City and Arsenal, our backline did struggle to contain him at times in terms of his movement, but then he messed up the final action. So I just felt like Arsenal conceded some uncharacteristic transitions. And I do wonder if that was just a balance striking between the partnership of Declan Rice and Thomas Partey, because I didn't see as many of those transition fears in the second half. And, I think you have to balance the play style of who your partner is. And fundamentally, we keep talking about how we haven't seen these people for the entire season, and we haven't seen them since the Community Shield. But that's also a negative in a sense. The chemistry is not there. So you do have to actually build that with the partner that you're doing. And so I felt like there was just some moments where our lines were a little bit loose. It was easy to play through us at moments. But fundamentally, that first half, what I loved to see was at least we were creating chances. And, we were actually creating chances by being brave between the lines. And really the one man that we're going to have to talk about a little bit later in isolation is Ben White. I thought he was incredible. Man of the match again. And so we will talk about him. But I just highlight him because he was one of the most clear examples of bravery between the lines, giving Kai Havertz what I felt like were 2 goals on a plate in the first half, who another one we should talk about. But we left almost 3 to 4 goals on the pitch and exited the first half 1-0 up, despite not being at our best. And I thought, when I saw that half, I was angry, but I was so calm. I felt as though this is an inevitable game of us winning. And that could be maybe in opposition to a lot of people's feelings online. But I the reason I say it as important is because when have you felt like that in a title run or when it mattered most at the end of a season?
Yep. This is a mid-November, sort of accumulating points performance against a lower half team. This isn't one of your biggest London rivals comes to you 4 games from the end of the season and you grind out a 2-0 win or a 1-0 win. We played in that way. Look, I agree with you. I think Mikel highlighted before the game their runs off the second line. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm sure you know what that means, but for those who don't, it's essentially the idea of essentially the second line being sort of in behind Rice and Partey. I think the issue was, and we someone on the instant reaction took this as me criticising Rice and Partey. Not at all, by the way. They just haven't played together. So they were jumping at the same time and they were retreating at the same time. They hadn't quite worked out that relationship. And there was a few opportunities where Chelsea with Madueke and Mudryk were finding those runs in behind the sort of diagonal out to in, into out runs. And Enzo and Caicedo had absolutely nothing on the ball in terms of centrally, but out wide they were finding a little bit of joy, getting in sort of in behind Tomiyasu and White when he marauded forward. So those were the concerns for me. But not massive ones, natural ones when you are playing against such talented individuals. Chelsea are a rubbish team, but they are talented individuals. And Madueke showed he can punish you. Nicholas Jackson, I actually think has some areas of development massively, but also see a lot of potential in. I think he's got as many goals as Drogba had in his first season. So he's not a total joke. I think So I was I think in the first half I was saying with you, I was pleased that we came off 1-0 up and hadn't conceded. But that second half, man, I don't know what Mikel said, but we came out absolutely firing. We looked on it. We looked sharp. We looked aggressive. We looked like the protagonists in this title race, but in this game. And I think the main thing is I felt the relationship between Rice and Partey sort of improved, but actually the commitment to the shape when defending the box was a bit better. The commitment forward and backwards, we looked like we found another gear energy-wise, and our execution improved off of that. And we scored some fantastic goals, so I'm really, really pleased. I want to go through the goals maybe as a way of getting to talk about some areas of the match. That Trossard goal, and maybe this is where we can sort of slightly talk about Partey as well. People talk about the Declan Rice run, which is lovely, is really lovely. But I want to talk about how quickly Thomas Partey gets out of his feet. Thomas Partey, it genuinely makes me like on the verge of tears to think about Thomas Partey and Jurrien Timber playing for Arsenal the whole of this season. I think I said in the interaction last night, and I stand by it. I genuinely think we win the league by 5 points with Timber and Partey.
I said it in January. Do you remember that pod when we were talking about those two in midfield?
I think you did.
It's
mate. They're unbelievable. But the thing I want to say about Partey to kind of set you up is the superpower that he has is the ball comes into him and it comes out of his feet so quickly. He's always got a picture. He always knows where his next pass is. And it's something that Jorginho, it feels like once he has the sort of spatial awareness and the understanding, and he can maybe finesse passes in a different way, or maybe has a bit more of a range than Partey, or shows more of a range than Partey. But what Partey has is that speed of thought. It's immediately out. It's immediately punched. It's so progressive. As we say, we don't always want that. But in this game, when Chelsea were struggling to get men back and bodies back, that first time ball into Declan Rice straight out, I don't think it happens with Jorginho. But yeah, how impressed were you with Partey's performance?
It's dual fold. It's on an individual level. We lack somebody who is so consistent at receiving within a block to turn, but then not having the fear to go forward. That is something that I think that Arsenal have from deep build-up areas for some reason, that as a collective unit, we struggle to be brave enough centrally in terms of finding people between the lines. And Partey almost doesn't have that switch. It's actually the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where there's actually zero recycling ability. Like, I think he sees a safe pass, but he goes too safe. Where's the most penetrative pass? I'm going to play it. And I think the consequence to that is it does lead to more transitions and more strain on your defensive unit, because you're playing more difficult, long-ranging, searching passes that can leave you vulnerable. No doubt. They are the most difficult passes, but trying them gives faith in the attacking players to make the runs that you want. So it's dual fold, right? Like it's in a sense, it's more difficult for your defense to handle if you get it wrong, but by getting it right, your attackers feel more comfortable that they're going to find there's someone behind you that will find you, and so they're more adventurous in their running. And I think that we started to see that as the half, and certainly in the second half as it went on. The attacker started saying, "Oh, I'm getting the ball. Oh, you're going to find me. Okay, I'm going to start running in this new manner." And it wasn't predictable. And that is the impact on the attack that I think gets missed when we talk about this Partey discussion. Now, I think also you have to talk about the impact of Declan Rice. And the reason that I mention Partey, because Timber has this same flexibility. When you have somebody so quick across the ground, both in a horizontal, but in a vertical sense, somebody that has a 5 to 10 yard radius where they are elite at getting to the marker, it allows you to make a mistake. Jorginho, when he's pandering on the ball and maybe he makes a mistake and he's caught in possession, he doesn't have the ability to retract and immediately spring backwards. And that leads to second fouling. It leads to him trying to slow the game down in other means. But there's a physical deficiency there. And so the team fundamentally knows this. And in order to protect them, they need to bring players close. What does that do? That makes our wingers and our press far more narrow. So we have to make our lines tighter, which means our attackers can't be adventurous on the last line. And that's a really important point that I don't think people are understanding, because that's a difference of 5 to 10 yards for our attackers away from goal. And, the reason I say that, Partey doesn't have to be there, it could be Timber, because he gives you that same second ball retrieval capacity, that same hounding capacity out of possession. So if you noticed, mate, I wish we could show back video, but have a look at the counter press again. The way that we regained seconds after losing it, that is different to what we've seen even all season when we've been top of second ball retention. The manner that we retrieved it, the touch regains was incredible. It really reminded me of old school Barca, the way that we all hounded a particular player when we lost the ball. And I think that ability to regain it so quickly, but then still keep your attackers high, is the important thing, because it's what drags defensive blocks out of position. And, I think it's easier to defend when the game's in front of you. That's really simple for people to understand. And simply put, if your most dangerous attackers are narrow, are deeper to help with the balance in midfield, right? It's not just Jorginho. But if there was a Zinchenko, it's the same issue here. We need to talk about a very specific quality in midfield, and that's what happens. Look, Declan Rice had a brilliant run, but again, he's another player that is closer to the ball because of the impact of a Thomas Partey or a Timber. Having that balance within the four-man pod box in midfield means Declan Rice doesn't have to be wide of the block, and there's no point in getting those marauding runs out wide that's not hurtful. The penetrative part of those runs are when they're central. And so it's just a lot of knock-on effects, I think. And the Thomas Partey part himself is the idea that he lacks complete fear in terms of playing the ball. And there needs to be a bit of that, right? There needs to be a bit more of that in our deep defensive block unit. I'm looking at William Saliba, who I think has a brilliant technique, but I find at times we've seen the tip of the iceberg in your capacity to really influence a match. And I'm looking at Ben White, by the way, another transition, who is getting that now. This man of the match performance, one of the reasons he stood out so much is because he's such a reference on the ball in deep build-up and his ability to really be brave and punchy. And so I think that's the big reason for me with the Thomas Partey. This idea that our attackers can stay on the last line. They don't have to be 5 to 10 yards deeper in the press to control for any loose balls. That helps them. Then individually, Thomas Partey is somebody that allows our best players to keep central. We don't keep Declan Rice out of the block. And lastly, he's somebody that will continuously find people. And so our attackers are naturally more adventurous with their runs. They're naturally going to be more expansive in the way that they're going to make runs because they know, okay, I've got a player that is seeing things that others don't, or at least willing to try. So I'm willing to try to run. And it's a combination of effects, in my opinion, there. But that's why they're so important. That's why they're such a miss, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think really well broken down. Good analysis of Partey. I think the kind of the expansive, the expansive quality he brings us through all those kind of knock-on effects and also his own individual players is really the key there. Let's kind of move on to another individual, maybe. I think in Ben White, who I thought was, again, extraordinary. 2 goals, obviously. The first being that nice left-footed one for the second, and obviously the one he absolutely, definitely meant and was 100% not a cross. Right, guys? Right. Wink, 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 wink. Also, I enjoyed that after the game he was interviewed, and someone said, "Did you mean it?" And he just didn't really respond. He was just like, "Goal's a goal." He wasn't like he wasn't trying to play the game of like, oh yeah, well maybe. You know, he was just like, well, whatever. I just absolutely love this guy so much. I think he is so important for our player. There was a period, sort of maybe end of last season, maybe or somewhere where I wouldn't say I was doubting White, but I was looking at that right hand side and I was going, can we maximise that? In the same way that we're probably looking at our forward areas going, have we got every last bit of juice out of our forward areas or our central midfielders or whatever? I was looking at that right back slot and going, do we get everything in there? And it's a lot to ask to get everything out of a slot. But, that's the level we've got to try and get to with Man City and Madrid and Bayern, etc.
Was he the cherry in the sundae for you as opposed to like the ice cream? Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's that is 100% the question. But what we've seen this season is Ben White he can do everything. He can do absolutely everything. I said on Twitter, he is becoming the protagonist in the final third in many aspects in terms of that triangle of Martin Ødegaard and Bukayo Saka. His recovery runs are unbelievable. I think he's improved 1v1. The way he can step into the midfield, the way he can keep us secure in the block, his commitment in his defending, how he protects us on the sides. You could write down every single, I think I said this earlier on a podcast I was on, you could write down every single aspect of Arsenal's play in a list. You could go right set pieces, free kicks, defending in a 4-4-2, counter press. You could write down every single thing that we do. Ben White is like maybe the third or more most important player or good at it in terms of his qualities of how good he is at that one thing, free throw-ins, whatever it is, and how important he is to every aspect of play. Ben White's up there, mate. Ben White is up there. He is becoming someone who has gone from someone who adapted really well to right back. Do you know what I mean? It's gone from he's doing really well at right back into someone you go, no, this is the best right back in the league, in my opinion. This is in all phases, in someone who can do every aspect of a right back's job, who can overlap, who can play those 1-2s, who can get back and defend, who can control his area, who can control his sphere. Everything he does has just gone from strength to strength to strength. And I'm reminded of that Carlos Cuesta interview where he says, your biggest strength is your capacity to learn. And that's what we've seen. It's the little things. It's the sharpness in his actions that have gone through the roof. I think he's so good. I think he's so good, and you cannot find that on the market now. You don't find Ben White on the market this summer. I'm sorry, you don't.
And I think I said in the instant reaction, I don't know. We speak of the Trent Alexander-Arnold role. Why don't we speak of the Ben White role? It's equally unique. Perhaps
it's the complete fullback. It's
in many senses. I mean, he's both a DM, he's a right center back at points. He's a right midfielder. He's a touchline right winger. He's a traditional 8 in the manner that he's feeding those passes to Kai Havertz. There's so many superlatives that I can talk about with Ben White. I clearly love him. He's been one of my favorite players at Arsenal. Period. I've always felt like this right back role was his transition. Once we bought him, that was my biggest idea about him. But he surpassed it. He's more. And I think I've talked in previous pods, by the way, in terms of, my supposed galaxy brain ideas about thinking about could he be a DM? And he shows a level of on-the-ball composure in midfield and a variance to his passing range that makes me think you are just a sponge. I could give you whatever role, right? And as a coach, I could expect you to play striker. And I think within 6 months, you'll make a very functional striker. I think, and this is a little bit hyperbole, of course, but it's this idea that you give him a challenge and he soaks it in. And, I think he maximizes himself, and I think he maximizes those around him. That's one of my biggest, I think, compliments of Ben White. There was a couple interviews where I remember he was talking about his relationship with Bukayo Saka, and he's like, it's so easy to play down that side with somebody like him. You can give him any type of ball and he makes you look good. Mate, you're becoming that. You're becoming that. People talk about Saliba, give him the praise. They talk about Saka, give him the praise. They talk about Martin Ødegaard as one of the best attacking midfielders in the league. They give him the praise. No, mate, you deserve it. You are in the limelight for being one of the best in your position at your craft. And it's fair. I think this idea about the one-on-one weakness out wide is something that I think he has with certain players, but it's not something that I would describe as a weakness in his game necessarily. I think that he started to eliminate a lot of those things. He started to eliminate them in the manner in which he's receiving. He's preparing the ball much cleaner. I'm seeing a lot more cocky Ben White in terms of his receiving of passes. There's a level of expectation now from my end. Oh, he's going to do something with it. Before, sometimes I felt like he would just play floated balls over the top and he would play to space. He wouldn't play to a man. It wouldn't be a thought. It would be more of the system tells me the space is there, so I will just play the ball. That could also apply to his crossing, by the way. But I don't see that anymore. I see very purposeful action to everything he does.
Yeah. And also on the 1v1 stuff, I think what's changed for me is it used to be he'd recover, set, and then go in for the 1v1. He'd recover, set himself in the correct position for the fullback, right? Knees bent, side on, don't get yourself caught, stay on your toes, all that stuff that we talked about. Now he doesn't do the set part. He recovers and he's going, right, I'm immediately in at you. I'm not giving you a chance to face me up 1v1. I'm not letting you get me right in my sort of fallback zone where I go, right, I'm going to have to make sure I get my technique right here. He doesn't allow, he's straight in. He's so proactive in his defending that he doesn't put himself in those situations. Now you could argue, well, is that a concern? Because what if he gets put in that situation? Well, if he never allows himself to be put in that situation, that tells you something, that he's recovering and getting into his wingers before they've even had the chance to sort of put him and set him in that zone.
It's the whole idea of Raya and his proactivity as a goalkeeper. I mean, part of the reason that you don't see saves is because of his high positioning, so he doesn't put you in a position to receive those saves. And it's I think football is a game. And, there's going to be days.
It is a game.
It is a game.
We can't deny that.
It is a game. You can't deny that.
We can't deny it.
You can't.
Guys, yeah. Cannon Podcast exclusive. Football is a game.
Look, there's always going to be periods where somebody comes out on top of you. And I'm really hesitant to describe a weakness in the game of a player because we see them consistently falter against maybe one player or one person. I've said this before. For some reason, Marcus Rashford does it brilliantly against Ben White. Ben White does not like Marcus Rashford for whatever reason. And it's not, a particular, I don't know, it's not a consistent game model. I've seen him do well against tricky wingers. It's not that he struggles with a particular profile. This isn't Kivior or Zinchenko that we're talking about, and I don't want to stay too long on this topic because it's probably the only con that you could maybe throw at him. But I think he's just taken a step up in terms of his in-possession quality that you have to highlight it. I mean, the times that he's finding people between the lines and some of these passes, mate, that he's threading between the fullback and the center back where he's seeing the run and he's shaping it. There's tempo to that. There's control to that. There's this like almost Martin Ødegaard-esque pace on it in terms of fading it. Like the ball he sends into Havertz, mate, that's not an easy pass. It's not just I'll send a whipped R2 on the controller to get it in pace, like it's so technical, and he does it on the run, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah, his cross variety is unbelievable. And I would say on the Rashford thing, I think it's more, you can get done by someone, you can have all the right technique and you can still get done. But I think he handled situations with wingers differently. He would engage much later than he does now. Yeah. If he's on a recovery run, he's coming to get you. He's not interested in doing the dance. Rob Holding v Ross Barkley. He's not going to put himself in that situation. No, but it's just not something he's interested in doing anymore, which I absolutely love. You mentioned him there. We should move on to a unbelievable performance from Martin Ødegaard. Mm-hmm. One of the best performances I've ever seen. I watched the comp of him yesterday, and it was all of his involvements. And it could have been a highlight reel. That could have been a highlight reel. Every single thing he touched turned to gold. Obviously, we had the assist for the Havertz goal. We should talk about maybe Havertz in just a second, although we're at danger of just picking out every single player and praising them. I do want to come to Martin Ødegaard. How impressed were you by his performance yesterday? I think the influence he shows, again, in every single... And this is what's so brilliant about Mikel, is he's picked players who can show influence in every single phase of play. You can have a brilliant player. Anthony at Man United, get him in a certain situation, he's brilliant. Of course he's brilliant. Get him on a comp on a highlight reel, beating his man 1v1 or cutting in on the left and sticking at top bins, yeah, no problem. But how many times does he get in that in the game? And how does he defend? How does he step up when games are getting tricky? How does he counter press? How does he... act when spaces are different? How does got my thumbs up on Riverside? How does he act when he's asked different questions, not in his strengths? And I think what we see with Martin Ødegaard, and John McKenzie said this on Twitter, and I completely agree with him. There's no phase of play he doesn't cover for Arsenal. There's no phase of play. He is everything to this Arsenal team. He is everything and more. As a captain, he's such a good example. Imagine being Miles Lewis-Skelly or Ethan Wanyeri or younger, one of these Max Dowman or whatever his name is, these guys coming through the Arsenal Academy, looking at the first team. We've been crying out for years for players who give everything for the badge, right? And, blood, sweat, tears, Arsenal, right? That is what Martin Ødegaard is and has the quality to back it up.
I think I finally have seen glimpses of the Sociedad Ødegaard this season. And it was the one thing I was waiting for. I think for me, at times he's somebody that can hold on to the ball a little bit too much. He's so technical. He's somebody that perhaps, because he's got the technique, the best pass of the match isn't even a goal. Do you know the one I'm talking about in deep right midfield where he cuts through the entire team for Havertz? That is the best pass. He has that, mate. When you're talking about the Ozil and the Cesc Fabregas and those playmakers, for me, that type of play is what you associate with, right? And I think he can do that. And to see him in this match, not just produce that one, but the actual assist for Havertz on his first goal, it's brilliant. Like when he finds space, he can see the game in a way that very few can. And I almost feel like there's a hesitancy to really play that pass from him sometimes. And he was just in brilliant form yesterday. I mean, he was seeing the pitch. He was brave between the lines. And he was pushing us forward. I do want to highlight out of possession. I said it on the instant reaction. Part of the secret sauce to Martin Ødegaard is because he is elite out of possession. And we don't associate that with those aesthetic types, those aesthetic ball manipulators that everybody loves to see because the ball's glued to their feet. They aren't elite out of possession. It's not just the stamina that he goes to meet markers. He truly is one of the best pressers in the world in terms of understanding where he needs to be, which pressing triggers. I still think his tackling technique isn't prime. He's not a prime Conte, but the way he harasses and is able to guide and shadow cover people to trouble is what clicks for this Arsenal team. He's not the one that does the crunching tackle. He's the one that guides you into the Ben White, guides you into the Declan Rice, guides you into the Bukayo Saka. That is what he's so crucial in terms of our press. He makes, if Jesus makes the bending run, Ødegaard hurries you into Saka, who nicks it, and boom, it's a regain, and we're off to an attack again. And the amount of times he does that job, it's taxing. Those are hard yards. And then he can make up the ground to then go into deep build-up and offer us a solution in build-up when we're struggling to get out. And I think that has to be an important part about this Martin Ødegaard discussion, because truly, I don't think that's something that he showed at any point in his career. I think he's always been somebody with high fitness, but he definitely didn't show this intensity out of possession at any of his loans. And that was something that he's developed on his own. And the reason that I'm highlighting it as a praise point is because it speaks to his character to learn, mate. And this is maybe the point of the podcast. The amount of players in this team that have shown their capacity to learn. And that's the exciting thing about a team. I'm sorry that you want to clown for being an average age of 23. We don't know the end goal. We haven't seen the story. We're still in Act 1 for so many of these players. And I think that, at least for me, Martin Ødegaard has more to give. And it's maybe a little bit crazy. And people think they take it as critique. No, I expect more because I see more with him. He's one of the few players in the squad that I think you can expect some of the 5%. I won't be as critical as I am with, for example, a Reece Nelson. For example, even an Emile Smith-Rowe and a Fabio Vieira. I'm not as critical with them because I don't expect as much. With him, he's reached a level now where I think he's undoubtedly one of the best attacking midfielders in the league. I don't think that you can deny that fact. I think he's...
Midfielders, mate.
Well,
midfielders.
100%.
He's one of the best midfielders in the league.
100%. And I think he also is somebody, personally, that you start looking at all the metrics. He may start slow in seasons, but he always ends up with like the most through balls, the most chances created. You start to read off those creativity stats. He's up there in the top percentile every season.
Yeah. I've got his numbers here. Martin Ødegaard leads all players across Europe's top 7 leagues for most open play chances created with 78, most successful passes into the penalty area with 102, most passes into the penalty area, most successful through balls, most through balls. But this is the thing. This is a player who, yes, those are all the lovely metrics we associate with Martin Ødegaard, and you start going, is he as good as Kevin De Bruyne? Is he as good as Bernardo Silva? I want to start saying, where is he related to Frank Lampard? Where is he related to Steven Gerrard? Where is he related to not to Rodri necessarily, but to Gundogan? Those types of players who have all phase responsibility. This is the thing. He's got that slash through his name, and we think of the umlaut on Ozil, and we think of Cesc Fabregas and stuff. But this is a guy who has so much more to his game, and middle phase responsibility, and the ability to influence games in so many different ways, and also the attacking output, which is sensational. We should move off the Chelsea game, because otherwise we're at risk of spending this entire podcast just praising our players, which I would love to do. But yeah, a really, really big win. Chelsea are shocking, absolutely shocking. But we should come on to Jurrien Timber, who made an appearance against Blackburn Rovers U21s and scored an absolutely unreal goal. I was sat in this very seat and went, and immediately texted you. So yeah, amazing to see him back. It's kind of painful in a way to watch the sharpness and watch the influence he had in that. It's U21s and we need to take some time. He also didn't look fit, to be fair. So he looked like he'd only play. I don't know how many minutes he played in the end, but he after about 35 minutes, you could tell he was starting to struggle. So it's a long road back for him. But that's fine. We know he's got the quality. And I look at players like Martinelli this season, and I look at players like Kivior and Zinchenko and Rice and Havertz and all these guys on that left-hand side, and you just go, what if the conversations we would have been having if Timber had been there? What if with Thomas Partey? But can he have any impact towards the end of the season? My prediction is maybe some minutes. If we can see a game out against Bournemouth, maybe against Everton, I would struggle to throw him in at Old Trafford unless we're 3-4-0 up, which of course we will be. I think he needs to make an appearance against Tottenham to qualify for a Premier League trophy, Premier League medal. By the way,
does he?
I think he actually. Yeah, I think he needs to make an appearance, so he might be on the bench and maybe get 1 minute at the end as a kind of who knows. But I can't see Arteta thinking that way. I don't think he would. So yeah, where are we at with Timber in terms of the impact he can have towards the end of the season?
I don't know. I'm a bit more. Look at the manner that he returned, mate. I'll throw it back to you like that. Look, obviously you're gonna in your first match back, you're gonna tire after 35 minutes. But I mean, and I'm not saying to throw him in for 90 minutes, but I didn't see a player that lacked sharpness in his actions. I saw a player that was
not sharpness in the actions, no.
Yeah, and I saw a player that wasn't lacking in agility. Like, here, let me put it to you this way: Thomas Partey, when injured, takes 3 weeks to get back to sharpness, quote unquote. I would argue even Jesus. But let me tell you, Payne, Tier, another player that didn't, Granit Xhaka. When he was injured with his, ligament injury, he was one of those players that, bam, first game back, you're like, oh, Xhaka's back. There's no rustiness to his actions and to his thought. I get the same thing with Yuri and Timber. I don't see any rustiness in thought or in actions to what he's doing. It is purely, I'm blowing wind. Like, I don't have the energy for this. But if you're telling me, are you sharp enough to go 1v1? Like, mate, I think he has a capacity to easily get 20, 30 minutes. I don't know how fast that develops into 90 minutes and if we have enough of a season to even give him that opportunity. But it wouldn't shock me that he gets at least one start and at least a 45 or a 60-minute run in the remaining games, whether that's at Bournemouth, at Everton. I still think that that's a capacity, and he'll show us enough to make you cry again, because it'll be a player that doesn't, he's a starter, mate. I don't know what else to say. And, I made the claim with Bhavs, so you're ready to defend it here. I think there's more left 8 capacities for him. Look at the way he underlaps, the intelligence in the runs. And, look, there's a certain passing influence that we want to talk about, but just his understanding about where to run to create space for others was what I was so excited about. Part of the reason, by the way, that he was so tired after 35 minutes is because Timber down that side was the one making the selfless runs between wide, through the middle, and underlaps. Coming into the pivot to be an option in terms of build-up. He was everywhere down that side. And that's why he was blowing guts, because, he was the most hard-running player down that side. And I just think he didn't even show his capacity for passing. And of course, look, the goal's brilliant. The goal's incredible. But it's not something that I didn't think Yuri and Timber had. And, I will say this, people, do your research on Yuri and Timber. He came up as a 10 at Feyenoord's academy. This isn't a player that has never played in midfield that I'm having some galaxy brain thought to. He's comfortable in these zones because he's grown up in the same way that Zinchenko was moved from 10 to left back. And I think that Yuri and Timber actually has a little bit more capacity in his duels, which is why you see that transition more. When people talk about Zinchenko, it's never because in possession you struggle. And actually, if Zinchenko is to maybe extend his career, you should think about going to midfield. I think left back is done for him at this level. And if you want to make a career, he should improve that part, because I think in midfield he has something to offer people. But Yuri and Timber, the reason that I think in those zones he's got the edge is because of that burst, that ability to really control his duels in the first 5 to 10 yards. That's so important in midfield. You can't give yourself 15 yards to recover. And he's a special player, mate. I don't want to keep going into. I made the claim in January, I think it was. I can't remember the exact pod that we talked about, but I kept highlighting Yuri and Timber changes Arsenal. And, he is somebody that I said to people, the amount of build-up variety that he could do, he's such a key cog. And, I know, like we were saying, can we say that it's so early? We've only seen X amount of minutes. For me, yeah. every time you see these minutes, it continues to prove there's no one like him in the squad. And there's a solution there that in the same way Martin Ødegaard provides every solution on the right, Jurrien Timber in a different way provides so many solutions to so many people down that side that I think he could have, not in the passing sense, but in terms of how key Martin Ødegaard is to making that side work, Jurrien Timber could be equally as key in the left-hand side's chemistry in terms of how that works, no matter who we recruit.
Yep, I agree. And we don't need to take it from you or me. We could take it from Mikel. Mikel says, Timber has qualities in the final third that no one else in the squad has. He said that, so I think you're bang on. The only thing about left 8 is I'm not ruling it out. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of question marks in terms of being in that slot, how that would then function with another left back or someone in that slot again. Maybe we don't want to put two.
I think it'd be more centre back.
Fine point on it.
It wouldn't be the traditional left back.
Yeah, possibly. But my point more being that I think we'd have to see it and the sort of the balance around it more than anything. I think Timber can possibly be in there, but I think it has an impact on Rice. I think it has an impact on that sort of left hand side and stuff. But look, who knows? We can maybe have a discussion about that another time. Last sort of 10 minutes of the pod, I do want to come to this. Where does this all leave us? We've got 4. We could talk. I was going to talk maybe some summer transfer plans and stuff, but I think there's too much on this bone to ignore. Where does this leave us? Because we maybe wanted to come back to bottling and the idea of bottling and what this team is and how we have a discussion about that as a fan base. And maybe I'll just go on that a second. I think I've always struggled with the bottling thing, because bottling implies that it was entirely up to you. It was entirely up to you and you completely blew it. I think there are games isolated last season where if you just looked at Arsenal, we bottled it. Yeah, the Southampton game, the Brighton game, whatever. But we don't exist in a vacuum. We don't. We just don't. I don't think it's useful for us to take on... Look, whether you think we did or didn't is kind of up to you, but I don't think it's a useful thing for us to go, yeah, we bottled last season, and that's good analysis, so therefore let's move on and see how we move. No, I just don't think it's good analysis. We have to consider what caused us to fall apart last season, what's not causing us to fall apart, supposedly this season, certainly in April, certainly in a sort of 3-game run or 4-game run as we've tended to do in the last couple of years, as I was referring to earlier. And also, again, I will always come back to the context that we exist in, the water that we swim in the best league in the world, the most intense league in the world, against the best manager in my opinion, in the world, and maybe ever. And I would argue one of the best Premier League, if not the best Premier League team of all time. We can't. It's sort of what you say about the stats with Arsenal, when we just reel them off and we say we're the best. Arsenal are currently the world's greatest team, lol, and we just sort of skip over them and don't quite land on them. I don't think we quite land on this. Like, are we hearing what we're saying? We are up against the greatest Premier League team of all time. That has to influence our analysis of this team. We can't not talk about it. Our analysis is not complete if we don't acknowledge that that's what we're up against. That is the yardstick. That's who we're trying to beat. That is our Michael Jordan when we're the Detroit Pistons, as George would say. So, we have to accept that. We have to look at that. And again, not take away and go, therefore, well, we can't do anything. City are just too good. No. We can improve. We can 100% improve. There's aspects of our game, our whole left-hand side can, if you look at the imbalance of our right and left in terms of the goal contributions, it's crazy. There's so much to go there. There's so much to go with all these players. We've spoken about the age profiles and the level of development and improvement, but we're still saying with Martin Ødegaard, with Ben White, with all these players, there's a level to go. Kai Havertz, there's a level to go. We want signings, so there's all these things that we can improve. But how do we marry all that with this idea that City are currently putting together the best run they've ever had for the best team we've ever seen under the best coach we've ever seen? That has to be part of our analysis, does it not?
Of course. And I mean, look, it's become a little bit of a moniker because I like the line and I can't believe I thought of it on the spot, but you have to make history to beat us. That's not a small statement. Like, to make history, not just in terms of Manchester City, but mate, in terms of what Pep's done, I think Pep Pep at City, I would argue, he's had great teams, right? Some of the records that he's been able to break at City could distinguish his City time, and you could make an argument for being better than his previous iterations at Bayern and at Barca. I think the Barca has a little bit of nostalgic effect because of the combination of the players that are involved. Not necessarily the achievements of the team, but you're talking
and
Messi.
The era of football.
The era, yeah. There's a great of the sport in Iniesta, in Xavi, in Busquets. He had to share the limelight with legends of the game in terms of players. But as a team, we didn't see the Centurion pace. Like if you're talking pure numbers and teams, they didn't achieve those things, right? And I think when you're starting to talk about this Man City team, again, the fact is a lot of people would critique it as maybe being a more poor team than last year's, and yet here's Pep on his largest unbeaten run of his tenure in the City job. So
we say that every year, though. We say City are off it every year.
We do, and it's not right. Mate, look, you know me, I feel as though that this discussion of bottling needs to have a definition, and it needs to have a definition in the sense of, I can understand that Arsenal have had a self-destructive gene, but if you lose to history, you're not bottling it. That is progression, okay? Now, is it progression to the stance that we've achieved everything that we want to get as a fan base? No, that's not what I'm saying. Those can be equally true on both hands. You could have not bottled and still improved. Like, it's neither, you don't either get to be top of the hill or bottle. It's not black and white in terms of that. And I can easily sit there and say that Arsenal could be potentially the best performing team across this season and still not win the title, because we are dealing with something that, by the way, I don't know if the Premier League has had this level of quality in the title race. We've certainly had moments where, like, the Aguero moment happened. So of course there's been close title races, but have the teams put up this level of quality that we're seeing? I don't really think so. And so it's context.
And just quickly on that, sorry, there was the kind of the Bernardo Silva thing the other day about fixtures, and a lot of the fixture stuff that came out, and you realise that, like, I've got quite strong beliefs on this about how much better football is now than it has ever been in terms of quality, in terms of, you might not get the individuals. I think it sort of relates to the kind of Pep Barca thing in terms of like Xavi and Iniesta, whatever. Back in those days, you had these, incredible people say, how could you say this era compares? Look at the individuals. Yeah. But look at the teams now. Look at how good the team, look how well coached the teams are. Look at the running data. Look at the scouting, the hours that go in at academy level. Kids are being scouted younger and younger, spending more and more hours. You can't tell me all that. You just watch a game from even 10 years, even 5 years ago. It's different. The quality of games are improving. The Bernardo Silva thing was about the fixture congestion and people saying, I saw a tweet about that had like hundreds of likes, and it was like, well, Everton played 60 games in the 70s and they were fine. Shut up. As if it's the same sport now as if it was in the 70s. It's mad. It's absolutely mad. It's like saying to someone, well, someone saying, "Oh, school's hard." Well, I went to school in the 70s, and it was absolutely fine. So you should be fine now. School's moved on, life's moved on, people have moved on, society's moved on, and football has certainly moved on in every single aspect: sports science, nutrition, the professionalism standards, the tactical level, the training methods, the kits, the equipment, the numbers, the stats. That every single thing has taken a step forward. We can't compare. It's not the same sport. So it does frustrate me that we and then quality is kind of how you define it. Whether quality is, I love the individuals back in the day, absolutely fine. I'm not necessarily disagree with that. And can we compare, let's say, Ronaldinho to Kevin De Bruyne now? I think it's quite hard. Who was the better player? Well, they didn't play in the same era. If Ronaldinho was here, who knows? You maybe can't compare that. But I tell you what you can compare is the teams, the level of quality, the quality in this title race, how good teams are. If Liverpool now played Liverpool in 2017-18, they'd beat them, mate.
And you know what?
They would.
You know what I think is funny? And just to contextualize this, again, this is how we rattle off records without understanding it. Arsenal have the best goal difference that they've achieved in the Premier League with 4 games to go. Do you guys understand that that's better than the Invincibles goal difference? Like, are people understanding that? Like, this goal difference is not even title worthy, and yet you were to substitute that in 2003 that gave you an Invincibles year.
Team.
So like, I just don't think that people are understanding that. And look, I never want to police a fan, because I'm conscious that makes me feel entitled or above certain fan opinion. But I think like it is wrong, and I will call this out as wrong, to sit there and say that you can break down a season to who is top of the mountain and bottling. There needs to be a middle ground here. And the fact is, if you're able to see a deep challenge into the end of April, it is April 24th, and we are sat top of the table with a game in hand. That is the definition of challenging for a title race, mate. And that is something that we weren't doing last year. So it is progression. I'm not going to hear it from other people that it's not progression. Are we getting the trophy in the speed and in the manner that you wanted? No. So say that. Don't say that it's not improvement. Don't say that it's bottling. Yep. Don't do any of this hyperbole because you want attention on the internet. Talk about the facts of the matter. And the facts are, no matter what happens, we're breaking history either as an Arsenal club right now, in terms of already having the best goal difference that we've ever seen in the Premier League, in our era at least, or Man City will break their history in terms of being the best team that they've ever been. And in either sense, we're making history. Like, in either way.
We're making history, baby.
We're making history. So I'm sat there, if you're telling me, like, George, how do you feel about this? I am ecstatic. I still think we can do it. And the fact that we're still debating this topic, can we or can't we? Whether or not we can is a different story. Yeah. But, mate, I think bottling has to be described when you're having over 5+ points, maybe 8-point gap between you and the next position, whether that's 4th, 5th, whatever metric you want to do. If you're within a 5 to 8 point gap, I would say that's significant. That is a gap. That is what you can say has been a difference. For me, I really don't think that this title will be a difference of that. I think it'll be a difference of 5 points.
It won't.
So,
it won't.
Yeah, just where I stand is we need to be confident in terms of what the team shows you and stop being, a pussy. The same players or people rather, that want to put these standards of bottling, by the way, are too afraid to call what they see in front of their face, which is Arsenal are the best performing team this season. I'm perfectly comfortable with saying that. And if people want to respond, well, what happens if you don't win it? Well, we don't win it. We don't win it because the team above us made history, and we're also equally phenomenal. So no, I'm not going to apologize and cry because another team made history in order to beat me. I'm not. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. We've got to finish there, but remember, football is a game. If you've learned one thing today, football is a game. Look, it was so good to beat Chelsea 5-0. We'll be back
so what you're
tomorrow for an
saying is
exclusive
you hate
podcast
games
for patrons.
now, eh? That's what
I
you're
hate
saying.
games. I hate football.
Mm-hmm.
I hate everyone. I hate podcasts.
This joke
I hate
will never
talking about football.
end. It is my version of the touch
die.
balls. It won't die.
Yeah. It will never end. Yes, we'll be back for an exclusive podcast for patrons and YouTube members tomorrow. We will be back for an instant reaction after Spurs on Sunday, and we'll be back on Monday for a main podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe to the Cannon Podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple, all that good stuff. Follow George at GeorgeV_AFC to watch him argue with strangers online all day, and we will see you very soon. Peace.